against innocent young female victims in our area. The case started with an anonymous letter that was sent to the Metropolitan Police Department in March of 2018. Our office, along with the Prince George's County Police Department and MPD, worked to open this investigation. I want to thank Detective Shepard, who was with us today in the courtroom, for her work. She believed in this case. And as anyone will tell you, that a case is only as strong as the individual investigating it, the time and effort that they put into it. And in this case, she put her soul into it. This was a very important case. This case was also important to me personally. I took personal accountability for this case and assigned myself to it, along with then Chief of Special Victims, Melissa Hotmeyer. And when she moved on to work for the federal government, Chief Jess Garth continued with this case, along with ASA Ashley Souls, as well as, of course, myself. So we are very pleased with the outcome today. We have also worked with our federal partners. This case was not only charged here in Prince George's County, but it was also, the defendant in this case was charged federally. And the reason why this case took a little longer to resolve is because we had to wait for the feds to conclude their investigation, their indictment process, and of course their plea process, which concluded last week. And so we are here this week with our plea agreement being read into the record. Mr. Everett plotted on unsuspecting underage girls, picking them up and placing them into semi-unconscious states by providing them with alcoholic drinks that were laced with an unknown substance. They would later wake up, finding themselves in a different location than they started, and having been sexually assaulted. Two of the victims were Howard University students who courageously came forward. This is important to note because we believe Mr. Everett specifically tried to target students attending Howard University. And while there are 4 victims whose cases were resolved today, we believe that there are other victims out there who, for whatever reason, chose not to come forward. And we understand it's very difficult to come forward, but we hope that knowing that he will be held accountable for his actions, that they will have some comfort in that. We are pleased with the plea agreement because this will take a dangerous predator off the streets. His first known victim was from Virginia, and that incident occurred in 2005. And the most recent incident that was known occurred in 2015. So this is someone who, over at least a decade, committed very serious offenses against multiple women. The information read into the record, the evidence read into the record today, was only a part of the evidence that we had in this case. We read into the record facts that supported the charges that the individual pled guilty on. Sexual assault cases are tough. These are some of the toughest cases to prove. And these types of cases also re-traumatize victims. So we will pursue these cases. We want to ensure that our victims know that we are on their side. But we also want to make sure that we get justice. And in this case, we were able to get justice for all 4 victims who came forward. He pled guilty in 3 cases, and in the 4th victim, he entered an Alford plea, but it's a guilty finding nonetheless. And so today ends at least the adjudication phase. There will be a sentencing phase that will take place on January 22nd of 2025 after the sentencing in federal court. So we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. Mr. Everett is facing up to 25 years in prison. Yes.
Sure, from Fox 5, really quick question. You said that you believe that there are more victims that are out there. If those victims were to now come forward, could Everett face additional new charges?
It's possible. And we encouraged at the time of the indictment, we encouraged victims to come forward. In fact, at the time of arrest, we encouraged victims to come forward, and at least one of those victims did come forward. And if there are other victims out there, we would like to know who they are. Yes.
Just a couple quick clarifications. So you never determined what he was lacing the drink with, but you do believe it wasn't just alcohol?
That is correct. That is correct.
And then as far as the sentencing, he faces, is it correct to say between 20 and 25?
That is correct,
Okay,
yes.
so that's the sentencing range. Then I believe in court you mentioned a 5th victim was seen on some of the images.
Yes, we could not identify that victim.
But you know there's at least
We believe, and so of course we would have needed more information from that individual to determine what happened in that instance. We believe that that individual was a victim, but again, we know it's difficult sometimes for individuals to come forward, so we are not in any way being critical of our victims because we know that they did not choose to be victims, and that's one of the things that that it's really tough to grapple with when you want people to come forward, but they didn't choose to put themselves in this situation. However, we want to take these violent predators off the streets. And in order to do so, we do need victims to come forward and know that they can be and will remain anonymous to the public. Obviously, in court, if we are pursuing a case, they will have to testify. But we take good care of our victims because we know, again, that this wasn't a choice. And it is very, very tough. And these acts of violence, and this is not just a sex act, this is an act of violence. These acts of violence stay with our victims for the rest of their lives. So we know it's tough, but we do want to have our victims come forward. We have a lot of services available to our victims, counseling services, relocation services, so they're not alone when they come forward.
Victim number 5, were you able to tell whether or not it was a minor or an adult?
We don't have enough information on that individual because, again, we saw the images. We don't have, we don't have enough information to determine exactly what happened. We believe that it's not consensual, but again, we would need to interview the individual in order to make that determination.
Can you talk a little bit about victim number 4 and why an Alford plea? What were the details that caused the Alford plea to go forward?
Because the defendant is not saying that he did that. So in the other cases, he has agreed that he was guilty of the crimes against the other 3. In the instance of the 4th individual, he did not believe that he committed a crime in that case, but he did believe that the state had sufficient evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he was guilty of a crime.
Talk a bit about the sentencing here and how that's going to work out, because I know it's ended on a federal case.
So the defendant is facing between 20 and upwards to 25 years. The state is binding itself and the court has bound itself to the sentence that is received at the federal level. This is a case that we worked on jointly because a lot of the evidence that we collected had to be analyzed using FBI and our federal partners. And so we appreciate the work and the support of the U.S. Attorney's Office and our federal partners.
Would the victim in the case be willing to share a few words?
Well, I don't know if she'll be. I'm not sure if she'll be willing to share a few words, but obviously, we did have one victim in the courtroom. I will now allow, if Just Garth, you want to talk about just how tough it is sometimes to prove these cases and what this plea means today for our victims.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. First, I do want to repeat what the state's attorney said and just thank all of our partners in this case, but I especially do want to thank our 4 named victims in this case who stuck with us from when these crimes were committed in 2005 all the way through today, and we anticipate at the sentencing hearing. It's a very difficult thing to do, to wait this long for justice, but we're proud to have delivered as much as we can today. These types of crimes, which we refer to as drug and alcohol-facilitated sexual assaults, are extremely, extremely difficult. They're difficult on our victims, and they're difficult to prove in court. Particularly they're difficult for our victims because there's a certain feeling of responsibility taken on by victims. When you're the person who's chosen to consume an alcoholic beverage, you take a certain amount of responsibility on yourself for what might happen to you when you're assaulted after consuming that beverage, even if you're at the point where you cannot consent. It's difficult for these victims to even come forward to report these crimes, much less to see a case through trial, to appear in court, to face the person who assaulted them, and to talk about what happened to people who will be judging them, essentially a jury or a judge. These cases are difficult to prove because it is a matter of educating our jurors and our community that people who are under the influence of drugs or alcohol cannot consent, even if they took those drugs and alcohol willingly. Once you reach a point where you can no longer consent, you become a victim when you are attacked or assaulted or abused or engaged in sexual contact without your ability to consent. I'm very, very proud of the work that was done on this case by former Chief Melissa Hotmeyer, by Detective Lisa Shepard, ASA Sal's, because what we've achieved today is a conviction in 4 cases that would have been difficult to prove at trial. But what we have today is an admission by Mr. Everett that this is a crime, that he did in fact take women who were promising and are still promising people in our community and took something away from them. He assaulted them, he made them into victims, but we've helped today, and they've actually taken on a lot of this themselves, but to turn themselves into survivors. I don't know if you have any additional questions for me, but I'm happy to answer anything that I can help with.
I know it's not your case, but the federal case and why it rose to that level.
Yes, so in this case, as the facts on the record that you heard today, some of the victims were minors, and in addition, many of them were transported over state lines from Washington, D.C. and from Virginia. In addition, anytime that you use any kind of an electronic device that's not actually produced in the state of Maryland to commit a crime, that can be used as a basis for a federal crime as well. We believed, and the U.S. Attorney's Office believed, that just based on the egregious nature of Mr. Everett's actions in this case, the number of victims that we think are still out there, that it was important that he be prosecuted at both the local level, because we want to stand up for the victims in our community, but also at the federal level as well.
So the 25 years maximum, is that for both offenses, federal and
Yes,
Virginia?
those sentences will run concurrently.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing I wanted to mention also is that, in this case and in so many cases, the defendant does not necessarily look like a predator. So this is someone who owned a business and who was well-spoken, who dressed well, who, by, all measures, looked and appeared to be an upstanding individual. And so one of the things I want to share with victims is that you cannot blame yourself. Oftentimes, people look at, well, if that person, did he look like a rapist or a predator? Oftentimes, these individuals just look like normal, everyday people. And so we don't want victims to feel like they somehow put themselves in jeopardy and that it was their fault. It was not their fault. It's not your fault if someone rapes you, if someone takes advantage of you, if someone gives you a substance that renders you unconscious. That is not your fault. It's their fault. And so today, Mr. Everett did take responsibility and accountability for his actions because he was guilty. And each of the named and known victims got justice today. And we have also gotten justice for our community, and we're very grateful for that. So thank you.
So were any blood tests done on the victims to show what type of drug? I think you answered part of that question, but was any blood tests done on the victims?
There was information that we got from the sexual assault kits that were tested by the FBI, and so. But the substance was really foreign and unknown, so not conclusive in terms of what it was, but we knew it was something that rendered them unconscious.
And was it the same substance that was used on all the victims?
That I can't say.
I want to ask you,
But
too, you had two victims in this case, two cases that were connected by DNA, right? And that kind of helped in the investigation. Can you talk a bit about how DNA plays a role?
DNA is critical. DNA is extremely important because it is scientific proof of connections between crimes or incidents. And so in this case, we knew that the same perpetrator committed at least 2 acts of assault. And we were able to do that through that level of testing. So our DNA lab, we are grateful for, and we have solved a number of cases and have been successful in court in a number of cases using DNA evidence. So thank you.
If this DNA is in CODIS, you all can find if there are additional victims out there. Is that correct?
Yes, if there's a hit. If there's a hit. So that's why one of the things I'm very excited about is the fact that our governor, as well as our Attorney General, have a new initiative to test more sexual assault kits. So they announced that last week that they were partnering up to provide resources for jurisdictions around the state of Maryland to test sexual assault kits. Those kits being tested, evidence from those kits being matched against DNA in the CODIS system could lead, not just in this case, but in other cases, to more sexual assaults being solved and more individuals being brought to justice. So we do appreciate our governor and our Attorney General for their work in that area. Thank you.
If there are no further questions, thank you so much.
Is the young lady going to speak, or is she chosen not to?
We shall not be speaking today. Thank you. Thank you again.